sun sank low on the horizon, painting the sky with deep oranges and bruised purples. A warm breeze whispered through the fields, but the calm was deceptive. Tonight it would be shattered. In the heart of a quiet countryside, a simple barn stood alone amid golden fields, its weathered wooden walls telling stories of seasons past. This was no ordinary barn. It was a sanctuary, a fortress of memories for old Mac Carter, a farmer whose calloused hands had nurtured the land for decades. The barn housed not just hay and tools, but a lifetime of dreams. Mac's daughter, Lily, played here as a child, tracing her fingers across the rich, earthy textures. It was more than shelter, it was home, but shadows crept closer. A rumor rippled through the small farming community. A group of desperate looters was on the prowl. They prowled the roads like wolves, scavenging for anything they could take. And tonight they had their sights set on Mac's barn. As twilight settled in, the air thickened with tension. Mac stood at the barn doors, leaning against the frame, squinting into the encroaching darkness. The familiar sounds of crickets filled the night, almost mocking him. He felt a chill run down his spine. This was no time for idle worries. He had a duty to protect what was his. His heart thumped a steady rhythm like the pounding of horse hooves. Minutes passed, but the tranquility shattered when shouts erupted from the tree line. The noise pierced the silence, and a knot tightened in Mac's gut. He straightened, suddenly aware of how vulnerable he was out here alone. He glanced around, his eyes landing on a rusted pitchfork propped against the barn. With its familiar weight in his hand, he felt a surge of courage. This was his home, and he would defend it. Figures emerged from the shadows, creeping closer with menacing intent. There were 3 of them, faces obscured by dark hoods. They moved with a predatory grace, eyes glinting like shards of glass in the fading light. Mac could feel his heart pounding. He had heard stories about them desperate men who would take anything to survive, blinded by hunger, fueled by greed. "Hey," one of them called out, a sneer in his voice. "Open up." Mac stepped forward, clutching the pitchfork tightly. "You want in." His voice was steady, strong, but inside fear clawed at him. Laughter erupted from the shadows, a cruel, mocking sound. "You think you can stop us? We're just here for supplies." Mac's grip tightened around the pitchfork. "Those supplies aren't just food, they're my life." The leader of the trio took a step forward, shadows swirling around him, and Mac could see the glint of metal and knife tucked at his waist. He didn't care. All he could think about were the delicate moments he had shared with Lily, her laughter blending with the rustle of hay. He couldn't allow those memories to be dirtied by violence or taken away by these looters. Mac shouted, heart aching but resolve firm. The threat in his voice echoed like thunder. The lunatics laughed, but the noise was laced with uncertainty. "You can't fight all of us, old man," the thug scoffed, stepping closer. "It's not about fighting," Mac said, eyes narrowing. In that moment, the world around him shifted. Years of hard labor, sacred promises, and whispers of love wrapped around him like a cloak. Mac's heart surged with adrenaline. He had nothing but this barn, this land, and memories of laughter that wouldn't fade. Suddenly, the thugs lunged forward. Mac swung his pitchfork, its wooden handle thrumming with energy. He struck at the lead intruder, who barely dodged the blow but stumbled back, surprised by the farmer's fire. The others hesitated, visibly put off by Mac's fierce determination. But desperation has a way of distorting courage. They surged forward again. With a growl, Mac pivoted, striking out once more. He didn't have to be bigger or faster than them. He had the heart of a lion. He thrust the pitchfork forward, catching one of the intruders across the arm. The man yelped, holding the wound, another flicker of doubt passing through their eyes. Blood dripped down into the dirt, and Mac seized that moment to step into the light, silhouetted against the barn's golden glow. "Leave now, and I'll let you walk away. Come any closer and you'll regret it," he bellowed, voice steady and confident. The leader, already rattled from the unexpected resistance, cursed under his breath. "Forget this." But panic pulsed in the air. The wounded man hissed, "We can't take on a crazy old man with a pitchfork." "Chicken," the leader spat before glaring at Mac. And without any further words, they turned, retreating into the thickening darkness. But Mac didn't lower his weapon until the sounds of their footsteps faded completely. Breathing hard, he leaned against the barn, chest heaving as the adrenaline crashed into exhaustion. The pitchfork slipped from his fingers and fell to the ground with a heavy thud. He felt every ounce of fear and relief pour over him like rain. But in the shadow of a nearby tree, a figure lingered quietly. For a heartbeat, Mac was too exhausted to notice, until he shifted and there stood Lily, eyes wide, filled with a mixture of fear and awe, watching her father defend their home. She had watched the entire scene unfold from her hidden place, breath hitching in her throat as the tension escalated. Mac rushed to her, pulling her close, wrapping his arms around her like a shield against the world. "I'm okay, sweetheart." His voice softened, trembling despite the strength he had just shown. She looked up at him, eyes shining with admiration, and he could see it, the pride. "You were so brave, Dad." He knelt down, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "You are the brave one, Lily. You always have been. You have a heart that can take on the world, but promise me you'll stay safe, this place." Together, they turned towards the barn, and in that moment it was more than wood and hay. It was a canvas of their connection, a place where love lived, where memories soared through the rafters. The threat had vanished, but the battle within had just begun. In the days that followed, tales of Mac's bravery rippled through the nearby farms. His act of defiance inspired more than just fear. It sparked resilience among his neighbors. Farm after farm, people began fortifying their homes, sharing supplies, and creating a network of protection. Gradually, the once peaceful land morphed into a community of guardians. They pooled resources. Neighbors would take turns watching over one another, gathering strength in unity. The looters may have come for easy pickings, but they unwittingly ignited something deeper, a bond that would unite them all. But for Mac, the battle didn't end with the looters. At dusk every evening, he and Lily walked amongst the fields, armed with more than pitchforks. They armed themselves with laughter and stories, rekindling their hopes under the sprawling sky. Lily would pipe up, and he would weave tales of bold farmers from days gone by, drawing wisdom from the soil beneath their feet. As the seasons rolled on, the sun and moon painted the skies with vibrant hues. New crops thrived in the fields, symbols of a collective spirit, a promise that they would protect one another above all. And as for Mac, he learned that true courage isn't just about fighting off intruders. It's about standing tall in the face of adversity, gathering your community, cherishing the love of a daughter, and never letting the darkness swallow the light. On the evenings when the stars twinkled brightly like diamonds scattered across velvet, he would watch Lily play in the barn, her laughter mingling with the whispers of the wind. Each giggle, each joyous shriek was a reminder of what they fought for, a promise that echoed throughout the land. No matter what happened next, Mac Carter knew one thing for certain. This barn would stand, his daughter would thrive, and together they would forever defend the fortress that love built. The wind howled like a distant wolf's cry, sending chills that prickled the skin of anyone who dared step outside. As shadows began to creep across the vast fields, a sense of foreboding settled over the farmland, where a century-old barn sat in solitude, weathered but proud. This barn wasn't just a repository for tools and hay. It was a treasure trove of memories, echoing laughter and childhood dreams wrapped in the broken walls. Old Tom Greaves had called this place home for over 40 years. The land had given him a life, a family, and a legacy he yearned to protect. But tonight, as dusk fell like an ominous curtain, Tom sensed something lurking beyond the horizon. Fear and uncertainty stirred in the air. The news had spread like wildfire. A gang of looters was on the move, preying on the vulnerable farmers in the area. For weeks, they had raided homes, stripping them bare. And now, every beat of Tom's heart felt like a warning. He stood at the mouth of the barn, leaning against the splintered wooden frame, worry etched deep into his weathered face. The barn door creaked softly, a whisper in the thickening silence. This wasn't just wood and hay. It was the essence of everything he had fought for, the countless hours spent sowing seeds, mending fences, and nurturing his daughter, Emily, who had always believed in the magic of this land. Tom glanced around the open fields, his eyes narrowing towards the brush line at the far edge, where the darkness loomed like a hungry beast. An unsettling shiver ran down his spine as the evening grew colder, but he refused to let fear take root. He knew that he couldn't show weakness, not now. He had to protect his home. Then, like a thunderclap, the stillness shattered. A raucous laughter echoed through the night, and three figures emerged from the tree line, stumbling forward like hungry vultures. Their intentions were clear. The leader, a burly man with wild eyes, raised his arm and pointed straight at Tom. "You, old man, open your barn." Tom clenched his fists, battling the tumult inside him. How could these men think they could storm into his life so easily? With a deep breath, he steadied himself, each inhale bolstering his resolve. "You want what's mine?" The bruiser laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. "Just hand it over. We don't want to get messy." With fire igniting in his chest, Tom took a step forward. "This land has only ever belonged to my family." He could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins, the instinct to defend everything he loved now vibrating in every fiber of his being. The other two men glanced at one another, hesitating as though weighing their options. But desperation is a powerful motivator, and that desperation clouded their judgment. They surged forward, fueled by greed and arrogance. Tom turned and snatched the pitchfork leaning by the barn door, the familiar heft instantly grounding him. This was no mere tool. It felt like a beacon of power. He gripped it tightly, the wooden handle a steady reminder of both the life he had built and the fight he was about to face. As one of the intruders lunged forward, Tom swung the pitchfork, but the man dodged just in time. It was a miss, but it ignited the fire inside Tom. He roared, heart pounding like the thunder rolling in the distance. The jokes were gone now, replaced by the weight of realization. Fear began to creep into the eyes of the attackers. They were met not with an old man trembling in his boots, but with the defiance of a warrior ready to defend his ground. Tom thrust the pitchfork again, catching the leader flush against the shoulder, just enough to make him stagger back with a grunt of surprise. "Leave now, or you'll regret it," Tom shouted, feeling more alive than ever. This was more than a battle, it was a declaration. Those men were about to learn that this farmer wouldn't back down. One of the thugs raised a knife, the metallic glimmer catching in the last rays of light. "You think you can fight us?" he sneered, charging forward as the gang regained their confidence. The air vibrated with tension. In that heartbeat, the world narrowed down to a single moment, as Tom realized that to maintain his legacy, he had to dig deep. He wasn't just fighting for crops or tools. He was fighting for Emily's future, for the stories that would echo through this land long after he was gone. "I stand for everything this place means," Tom replied, voice steady as he leveled the pitchfork with an intensity that burned in his eyes. Before the attackers could close in further, Tom lunged, shoving the pitchfork forward once more. It struck hard against the knife-wielding attacker, knocking him off balance. In a flash, Tom took aim at the others, fueled by a fire that refused to be extinguished. His body moved on instinct, the chaos collapsing into focus. He shouted, and the sheer ferocity of his voice sent a tremor through the intruder's resolve. The leader, now bleeding and fearful, glanced at his companions, and for the first time, doubt flickered across their faces. Tom pressed forward again, wielding the pitchfork like a harpoon meant to pierce the night's darkness. He was no longer just an old farmer. He was a titan standing against an emerging storm. With every step forward, he pushed the men back, their confidence crumbling like dry leaves underfoot. But then, at the edge of the escalating chaos, he saw her. Emily stood frozen in wide-eyed wonder, just beyond the shadows of the barn, clutching a small lantern in her hands. The moment their eyes met struck like lightning. She was the reason he fought, the embodiment of every hope and dream he held dear. His heart raced with a mixture of pride and fear. She called, voice trembling but unwavering as she took a step forward, unwilling to retreat. Tom's heart swelled with both love and dread. "Stay back, Em." But Emily shook her head, stepping further into the light. "I want to help." Desperation rippled through him. He couldn't allow her to face this danger. No. In that moment, something shifted. Em's courage ignited the fire in Tom's heart anew. She was the light that illuminated the darkness amidst the chaos, and he realized that together they could defend this life they loved. With renewed vigor, Tom turned his glare back toward the intruders. "You want this place," he shouted, raising the pitchfork high, the strength of his daughter acting as a lifeline, binding them together. The attackers hesitated, their bravado faltering as they exchanged fearful glances. The power of family, of standing together against adversity, was palpable, transforming fear into a raging flame. One of the men snapped, "Forget this." Panic seeped into his voice, and with that the gang scrambled back into the enveloping darkness, their confidence shattered. Tom stood tall, pitchfork ready, heart racing as they fled into the night, just shadows disappearing into the thickening mist. He watched them retreat, breaths coming heavy and fast, adrenaline rushing through him like wildfire. Victory coursed through his veins, but it was more than just the thrill of winning a battle. It was the knowledge that he had stood between his family and harm. As silence enveloped the barn, Tom turned to Emily, who rushed into his arms, trembling but bursting with pride. "You were amazing, Dad." He bent down, eyes softening as he held her close, relieved the confrontation was over. "I couldn't let them take anything from us, sweetheart. This barn, this land, they're ours." In the aftermath of that night, word spread across the neighboring farms about the bravery of old Tom Greaves, who had stood alone against 3 men trying to rob him of everything that mattered. What could have turned into a tale of fear transformed into a saga of resilience, a rallying cry for every farmer in the region, emboldening them. Soon after, farmers began fortifying their homes, sharing resources, and creating watch systems. Every barn became a beacon of hope, symbolizing strength in the community. They gathered to share stories, food, and laughter, learning from one another while recounting the fateful night when Tom turned the tide against despair. As nights turned into weeks, Tom found comfort in the collective spirit surrounding them. And under the vast canvas of starlit skies, he would sit on the porch with Emily, recounting tales of their family history, the struggles, the victories, the hard-earned wisdom that shaped their lives. Emily asked one evening, the wind whispering secrets to the fields. Tom looked out at the moonlit expanse, her small hand clasped in his. Perhaps. And so they did. They fortified the barn not just against looters, but against the erosion of fear. They filled it with laughter and dreams, transforming it into a sanctuary that would shelter them, not just from intruders, but from the uncertainties of the world outside. The barn became a symbol of defiance and family, a promise that love would always triumph when anchored in unity. As seasons passed, Tom and Emily worked the fields side by side, harvesting crops and sowing new dreams. The barn stood tall amidst the golden grains, a reminder of the night that changed everything, a testament that bravery can bloom in the heart of even the most ordinary souls. For in the end, it wasn't just about protecting land or possessions. It was about safeguarding the essence of who they were, their memories, their laughter, and the bond that outshone the darkest of nights. And together, they would forever cherish the magic that thrived where love resided, always ready to defend it with an unyielding heart. The moon hung high, illuminating the fields like a silver coin tossed into a deep, dark well. Shadows danced among the rows of corn, swirling like whispers of secrets long buried. It was supposed to be a peaceful night, but the stillness of the air shifted suddenly. A chill crept in, tension crackling like static electricity. Something was coming. At the edge of those fields, a weathered barn stood firm, its wooden beams creaking gently in the night breeze. This barn was not just a structure. It was a heart beating rhythmically for the Cooper family, a sanctuary filled with memories of laughter, hard work, and love. Old Sam Cooper, the farmer, had toiled on this land for years. He had seen seasons change and the sun rise and set countless times. Each day brings new challenges and rewards. But tonight felt different. Sam could sense it. A storm was brewing, but it wasn't the kind you could predict, with dark clouds rolling in. It was a storm of desperation, the kind that turned ordinary men into thieves. Suddenly, in the distance, there was a growl, voices breaking the night's serenity, sinister laughter nearing. Sam's heart raced. He stepped out of the barn, grounding himself against the cool wood. His hand instinctively dropped to the pitchfork at his side, the rough handle familiar, a friend in looming danger. It had been through many a harvest and now seemed ready to defend what was rightfully his. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the trees, dark and mocking like the call of a raven. Sam squinted into the inky blackness, and his instincts screamed at him. 3 figures emerged, stumbling out of the tree line shrouded in shadow. They appeared ragged and wild, driven by desperation, a hunger that made their eyes gleam like those of wild animals. One of them shouted, swaggering forward with an arrogance born of fear, "Open the barn!" Sam's heart sank, but he straightened, a fierce determination rising within him. "And if I don't?" His voice echoed, steady and booming against the night. The leader of the trio laughed, a horrible, shrill sound that sent shivers up his spine. "Yeah, we think we can take whatever we want, people like you." But Sam wouldn't let them. He stepped forward, pitchfork raised, the moonlight casting shadows that danced around him like warriors preparing for battle. "You won't take a thing from me, not while I still breathe. This land feeds my family." The moment hung between them, thick and heavy, charged with raw energy. A palpable fear flashed in the eyes of the trespassers. They hadn't expected this. A farmer standing his ground, ready to fight. "Come on, let's get the food," one of the men urged, but there was uncertainty in his voice now, a hint of panic creeping in. Sam barked, pumping new strength into his voice, channeling the decades of toil that had shaped him into the sturdy man he was today. With that proclamation, the thugs lunged forward, fueled by both greed and a wave of adrenaline. Sam moved like a man possessed, swinging the pitchfork fiercely. It whizzed through the air, catching one of the intruders on the shoulder, forcing him back with a shout. Sam could feel his heart thumping with each movement, adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. He was aware that fear and power existed in this moment, the ancient dance of predator and prey, and he would not be the prey. Gang hesitated but then pressed on again, anger mixing with desperation. They would take what was theirs. The leader lunged, knife glinting under the pale moonlight, slashing toward Sam. Sam blocked, instinctually using the pitchfork as a shield, the clattering metal reverberating through the night. Sam growled, every ounce of fatherhood integrated into that roar. Every memory of his daughter, Mia, his late wife, and all that this barn represented coalesced into his strength, into this act of defiance. It was more than defending crops. It was the fight for his family's legacy. With one mighty swing, he caught the leader again, this time catching him off balance, sending him sprawling into the dirt, knife skidding away. The other two paused, their bravado beginning to evaporate beneath the fierce determination radiating from Sam. "Get back!" Sam shouted, face flushed with defiance. But the air was thick with tension, and Sam could see doubt flickering in their eyes. Just then, a familiar voice called from the shadows. "Dad?" It was Mia, his teenage daughter, standing quietly behind a stack of hay bales, clutching a lantern with white-knuckled hands. Sam's heart raced, not just with adrenaline but with fear. He could feel all the weight of fatherhood pressing down on him. "Mia!" he yelled, panic rushing through him. But her feet had already begun to move toward him, drawn into the fray by the chaos that thundered around them. "I can help." Her eyes shone fiercely, filled with determination. "No." Sam's voice cracked, desperation seeping through as he waved her back. He didn't want her anywhere near this conflict, didn't want her to witness this dark side of humanity. Yet fear and courage often walk hand in hand. Mia stood firm. "I'm not afraid, Dad." In that moment, Sam felt something shift deep within him, a pivot from protector to partner. With her by his side, they could stand against anything. Her bravery ignited something primal inside him. "All right," he said, voice steadier now, eyes narrowing into focus. The intruders, once bold, were now visibly shaken. They had expected an easy win, but the presence of Mia, her unyielding spirit, changed everything. Sam and Mia braced themselves side by side, pitchfork raised, the lantern illuminating the fear creeping into the looter's eyes. "Leave now, and you might escape with your skin intact." Sam shouted, feeling the energy surge between him and his daughter. With a roar of defiance that echoed across the farmland, the two stood together, a formidable duo against the encroaching darkness. The gang exchanged nervous glances, uncertainty now overriding their hunger. They hadn't signed up for a fight against a father and daughter fighting to protect their home. One of them shouted, his bravado crumbling as he raised his hands in surrender. The others followed suit, backing away slowly, the weight of their greed now heavy in the air. "We don't want any trouble," the leader stammered, clearly rattled. Sam didn't lower his pitchfork. Instead, he kept it aimed now not just with anger but with the fierceness of a guardian. "You've threatened what's mine." Shadows flickered and retreated, the intruders fading into the night, leaving nothing but an unsettling silence behind them. Sam and Mia stood there, their breaths heavy, disbelief washing over them like a wave crashing against the shore. He turned to her, awash in relief. "You were amazing back there, Mia." Mia beamed, the fear of the moment fading, replaced by the triumph of standing together. As they slowly made their way back into the barn, they could hear the night awakening again, the rustle of the wind in the trees, the soft chirping of crickets. It felt eerily quiet now, as if the world itself was holding its breath. But the moment within that barn had forged something unbreakable. The bond between father and daughter was now tempered in courage, a shared struggle that defined them both. Weeks passed in the aftermath of that harrowing night, but the ripple effects of their bravery coursed through the community. Word spread, stories turned into legends about the farmer and his daughter who defended their land against thieves. Neighbors rallied, not just in protection, but in solidarity. They began locking arms, sharing resources, and forming a network that fortified each home and barn. Sam and Mia created a community watch. They turned their fears into strength, pulling everyone closer together. Barns filled with laughter again, not just for the food they preserved, but for the memories created between friends and family. Each shared meal wrapped in warmth, each story of survival mingled with joy. Mia asked one evening as they sat together on the porch, gazing at the barn glowing softly under the starlit sky. Sam chuckled, a warm sound that echoed like music. With every sunset that painted the fields in hues of orange and purple, they began cultivating new dreams. They wanted to expand the farm, grow more crops, maybe even start a local market. The barn became a center of resilience, a place where hope flourished like wildflowers across the land. One evening, as they prepared to secure the barn for the night, Sam glanced at Mia, who was busy painting a sign for their market. Mia nodded, her eyes bright with laughter. "Bring it on." And together they would, with their barn as a fortress, standing tall against despair, echoing laughter across ages and generations. In the heart of that land, beneath the vast night sky, they had learned that courage, when shared, shines far brighter than fear. As they locked up for the night, they held onto a shared promise, to defend not only their land but the spirit of family, love, and unity that held them all together. The world outside might twist and turn, but within the walls of that barn, they built a sanctuary, an unyielding testament to the power of standing together in the face of darkness. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the rolling hills of the countryside. In the heart of those serene fields stood a barn, an old structure built from memory and roughened wood that had weathered countless storms. This barn was the lifeblood of the Miller family, a place where generations had come together in laughter, toil, and warmth. But tonight, all of that was about to be tested. Jake Miller, the farmer, leaned against the barn door, his calloused hands gripping the worn wood. He could hear the soft rustle of leaves in the crisp autumn air. But beneath that peaceful sound lay something more sinister, a tension that crackled like dry branches before a flame. There had been whispers in town, stories of looters roaming nearby, desperate men who would take everything from hardworking families. As the sun melted into the horizon, a primal instinct unfurled in Jake. He needed to protect what was his. Suddenly, laughter sliced through the stillness, loud and mocking. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He turned to see three figures emerging from the shadows of the trees, their eyes glinting with greed. They moved like wolves stalking their prey, fueled by desperation and malice. One of them called, swaggering forward with an air of false bravado, "Open up that barn." Jake's blood ran cold. These men didn't see him as a protector, they saw him as a victim, but he wouldn't allow it. He straightened his back, feeling the weight of his ancestors press upon him, and answered, "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine?" The leader of the trio laughed, the sound harsh and belligerent. "Look at you, tough guy, you're outnumbered." But Jake's resolve hardened. He glanced around the barn, memories flooding through him. His father teaching him how to plant seeds, his mother's smile as she baked bread from the fruits of their labor, the laughter of his children playing hide and seek among the hay bales. Each memory washed over him, fueling the fire that burned deep within. He shouted, grounding himself with the pitchfork he had at his side, a sturdy tool now transformed into a weapon. The moonlight glinted off its metallic prongs as he gripped it tightly. The looters hesitated, surprise flickering across their faces. But desperation often breeds recklessness, and they surged forward, shouting derogatory curses as they moved. Jake's adrenaline surged as he thrust the pitchfork out, catching the nearest attacker in the leg. The man howled in pain, stumbling back into the others, fury painting his cheeks a furious red. They weren't expecting resistance, and they certainly hadn't expected the fierceness of a man defending not just possessions, but generations of legacy. The gang exchanged alarmed glances, a flicker of fear threading through their bravado. He threw it, and Jake instinctively ducked, feeling the rush of wind as it passed overhead. Jake used the moment of chaos to swing the pitchfork again, narrowly missing the leader but forcing him to retreat a step. "I'll defend what's mine to the last breath," he bellowed. Fueled by a mix of anger and determination, Jake was suddenly seized by the vivid images of his loved ones. His wife, Claire, who had fiercely supported him through thick and thin, and the children who threw their arms around him after a long day on the farm. With every swing of the pitchfork, he felt as if he was fighting for them, a father wrestling to protect his family's very existence. The two remaining looters lunged again, and in the confusion, Jake twisted and jabbed at them, his movement fueled by an instinct older than time itself. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a guardian, a man shaped by the earth itself, filled with tenacity and resolve. One of the intruders caught him across the arm, lashing out with desperation. Pain flared, but Jake tightened his grip on the pitchfork, roaring through the agony. He shouted, pivoting and sending the pitchfork careening toward them again. The leader, now bleeding, turned to flee, dragging his two bewildered companions along. The group stumbled back, their bravado evaporating into the night air as panic took hold. The leader shouted, retreating into the shadows, his voice wavering as he disappeared into the trees. Breathless, Jake lowered the pitchfork, leaning heavily against the barn wall, panic slowly fading into disbelief. They were gone. Victory washed over him like a wave. But in that moment of euphoria, another thought pierced through the fog of adrenaline. Where was Claire? A voice called from inside, small and frightened. Jake's heart seized as he realized his wife must have heard the clash from within the barn. He shouted back, rushing inside, the barn doors creaking as he swung them open wide. There she stood, pale but strong, their youngest daughter, Lily, clinging to her side, eyes wide with fear. Claire began, but Jake shook his head, rushing to embrace them both. "It's okay. They're gone." Her eyes searched his, worry mingled with pride. "I heard the commotion." He held them close, heart pounding as he whispered promises of safety. But as the shadows began to melt away, Jake realized the fight wasn't just for this night. It was for the future, a fight to keep their family safe in an unforgiving world. The looters might be gone now, but what if they returned? Jake's mind raced, fears intermingling with flashes of determination. He couldn't let this happen again. In the days that followed, the village buzzed with news of the confrontation. Jake became something of a local legend, the man who had courageously defended his barn against thieves. But with each retelling, Jake felt the anxiety spiral within him. What if others weren't as lucky? What if there was a next time? That evening, he gathered his family around the dinner table, eyes fixed on his children. "We need to prepare ourselves," he said, his voice steady. "What happened the other night could happen again." Claire nodded, worry etched on her face. "We should reach out to the neighbors." So they did. The following days turned into a whirlwind of organizing. Jake and Claire visited neighboring families, sharing their story and urging everyone to come together. They held meetings at the community center, discussions about safety, strategies to safeguard their homes. Bit by bit, fences were repaired and barn doors secured, but more than that, a sense of unity blossomed among the villagers. As the town tightened its defenses, something remarkable began to happen. The fear that had once gripped the community transformed into resilience. They stood shoulder to shoulder, families coming together to share meals, stories, laughter, and the weight of their burdens. They started a patrol system, watching over each other's homes like a tapestry woven from devotion and strength. One evening, As Jake leaned against the porch post, he could see neighbors gathering to discuss crops, wisdom shared freely as they forged a bond that went deeper than any tool or fence. Lily sat at his feet, playing with a strand of wild grass, blissfully unaware of the storm they had faced. But to Jake, that innocence was worth every ounce of his fight, protected by love, fortified by unity. And then, as if the world had shifted, a sense of security replaced the anxiety. The barn, once a battleground, became a symbol of strength, a place where families danced in the evenings, where laughter bubbled over and children played hide and seek. But deep in the recesses of Jake's mind, a spark of uncertainty lingered. What if their efforts were in vain? What if the next time they weren't so lucky? One quiet night, as stars blanketed the sky, Jake stood at the base of the barn, eyes straining against the shadows creeping from the tree line. It was then that he felt it, the unmistakable rush of instinct. He couldn't shake the feeling that trouble loomed just beyond their reach. He called, urgency lacing his voice. "Grab the lantern." As Claire joined him, they stepped out into the darkness, heartbeats echoing like war drums in his ears. Together, they prowled the edge of their land, flashlight beams cutting through the oppressive shadows, flickering against the swaying grass. Time seemed to stretch as they walked, tension weaving an invisible thread around them. They moved cautiously, the silence thick as they observed the boundaries of their farmland, ensuring nothing was amiss. Then a noise shattered the night, a rustling, violent and close. Instinctively, Jake glanced at Claire. "Stay here," he hissed, gritting his teeth as he approached the source of the sound, heart racing. With every inch he moved, he felt the weight of responsibility like an anchor around his chest. His breath caught as he peered around the edge of the barn. And there they were, three shadowy figures, just as before, whispering and pointing toward the barn where the supplies lay. Jake's resolve solidified, a wildfire of defiance igniting in his gut. He yelled, stepping into the open with the pitchfork raised high, silhouette framed by the moon. The looters spun around, eyes wide with shock. One of them shouted, panic evident in his voice as they backed away. But Jake felt a wave of fear rush through him. It wasn't just a fight for his property. It was a fight for everything they had built. He roared, voice shaking the very earth beneath them. This time the gang didn't hesitate. They turned to run, scrambling back into the shadows, the sound of their retreat echoing into the night. Breathless, Jake lowered the pitchfork, adrenaline coursing through him. But as he glanced back at Claire, confusion flooded his mind. He questioned aloud, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. "They thought you'd back down," Claire replied, her voice steady, even as her eyes danced with uncertainty. "But you didn't." And there, in the quiet aftermath, as laughter faded into the cool night air, Jake realized that true strength lay not just in confronting physical danger, but in standing resolute against fear itself. The barn, their home, stood tall as a testament to the bonds they forged and the battles they faced together. As dawn broke, the sky transformed, pouring gold and warmth over the fields. Farmers gathered, hearts intertwined in purpose, unified by the challenges they faced and the protection they offered one another. Jake stood strong at the heart of it all, surrounded by neighbors, friends, and family, all of them vowing to keep defending their way of life, to ensure that fear would never again overshadow the love they cultivated. From that day forward, Jake was no longer just a farmer. He became a leader, a symbol of the fierce love that grew deep in the soil of their community. And as the barn continued to shelter laughter, dreams, and memories, it forged a legacy rooted in bravery, reminding everyone that even in the darkest of times, hope shines brightest when united in purpose and love. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rolling landscape. In the heart of these fields, an old barn stood proudly, its weathered wood a testament to years of hard work and dedication. This barn was not just a structure, it was a sanctuary for Thomas Hayes, a farmer whose life was bound to the land. The barn held the echoes of laughter, memories of countless seasons, and dreams that buried themselves deep in the soil. But now, as twilight descended upon the world, a storm brewed not of nature, but of human greed. Thomas felt it in his bones. The whispers of looters had reached even this quiet corner of the countryside, men driven mad by desperation, prowling, looking for holes to pick, eager to strip away everything a good man had worked for. As he leaned against the barn door, the soft rustling of the leaves morphed into a menacing whisper. A chill raced down his spine. His grip tightened around the handle of his old pitchfork, the familiar weight offering a fleeting sense of comfort. It felt heavier than just a tool. Tonight it was a weapon, a reminder of the life he cherished. Then a sound cut through the air, a thud against the ground, followed by muffled laughter, sharp and cruel. Thomas squinted into the gathering darkness. There they were, three figures creeping toward him, shadows flickering in the dim light. They moved with a swagger, emboldened by the thought of an easy heist. One of them shouted, his voice dripping with contempt, "Open the barn!" Fear gripped Thomas, but he forced it down, summoning the strength buried within him. He called back, his voice steady, an anchor amidst the storm. The leader of the gang smirked, stepping forward with a swagger that concealed his insecurity. "What are you going to do? You're just an old farmer." Thomas felt fire coursing through him. This was not just his livelihood at stake. This was his home, the memories that seemed to dance in the corners of the barn. He shouted, raising the pitchfork defiantly. For a moment, the laughter faltered. The three men exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their otherwise confident faces. But desperation is a reckless beast. They surged forward, and Thomas felt his heart pound like thunder resonating through the air. The first looter lunged at him, fists swinging, but Thomas sidestepped, swinging his pitchfork with precision. It struck the man's side, knocking him back. A yelp rang out, but before Thomas could savor that small victory, the remaining two rushed him, rage propelling them forward like a stampede. One man shouted, clutching a makeshift weapon, a broken piece of wood jagged at the edges. Determination surged within Thomas as he thrashed the pitchfork with all his might. The front of the barn became a chaotic battleground, a clash of desperation and resolve, a fight for dignity and survival. Each swing felt like a pulse of his very essence, defining who he was, not just as a farmer but as a protector of everything he held dear. He shouted, voice booming with authority. Adrenaline flowed through his veins, drowning out the pain as a fist connected with his jaw. The impact stung, but he couldn't afford to falter. He jabbed the pitchfork forward again, catching the second attacker in the legs, shoving him to the ground with a grunt of pain. The leader yelled, now visibly shaken but far from admitting defeat. "We can take what we want," but something within Thomas ignited. "You want to take from me?" He roared, his voice carrying across the fields, an echo of defiance against the twilight. In that moment, everything became more than just a fight. This battle unfolded in the context of a man standing up for his family, for the memories embedded within those walls. Images of his daughter, Ellie, flooded his mind. Her laughter, her tiny hands helping him plant seeds in the spring, their shared dreams intertwined in the very fabric of this barn. Fueled by those thoughts, he swung again, pushing the leader back just enough to break their advance. The fear was palpable on their faces now, and with that flicker of doubt, Thomas seized his moment. He charged forward, pitchfork raised high, his body an extension of all the emotions crashing within him. He shouted as he thrust the pitchfork forward, knocking it against the dirt. The loud thud reverberated as if to amplify his words, and just like that, panic gripped the intruders. One of them screamed, finally acknowledging the reality of their mistake. The trio stumbled backward, their swagger replaced with sheer terror, and as they dashed into the darkness, their laughter was replaced by howls of fear. The night air carried their retreating cries, fading into the silence of the evening. Thomas stood there, breathless and bruised, chest heaving. The adrenaline slowly ebbed away, leaving behind a haze of shock and disbelief. He hadn't just defended his barn, he had fought off an invasion, a threat to everything he had built for his family. A voice called from the barn, breaking the silence. Thomas shouted, rushing inside, heart pounding with raw concern. He found her at the back, eyes wide with fear, clutching a stuffed animal tightly in her arms. She asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm fine," he reassured her, kneeling down to pull her into his arms. The warmth of her embrace flooded his heart with relief, obliterating the chaos that had just unfolded. As the night deepened, they huddled together in the glow of a lantern. Ellie whispered, her small voice trembling with fear, "They won't," Thomas promised, despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. "If they do, we'll be ready." But even as he spoke, doubt lingered in his mind. They had shown their faces once. How long would it be before they returned? Fear can be a haunting shadow, especially in the dead of night. The next day, the village buzzed with tales of Thomas's bravery. Neighbors shared their own stories of close encounters, of sleepless nights filled with worry. It became a communal resolve, and that fire of fear transformed into something greater, a fierce determination to defend their homes. Feeling empowered and emboldened, Thomas decided to take matters into his own hands. He organized meetings, calling on fellow farmers and families, encouraging them to unite against the threat. They pooled resources, shared experiences, and devised plans to fortify their lands. Safety in numbers, they agreed, would be their strongest shield against the storm. As they worked together, something remarkable took shape. The bonds formed within the community grew stronger. Farmers helped one another build defenses, securing barns and homes alike. Laughter mingled with toil as they reinforced their connections, the very fabric of their lives woven tighter amid rising fears. Days turned into weeks, and the barn that had once stood as a mere structure now became a beacon of hope, a center for their efforts, filled with bustling activity and warmth. They transformed it into a community hub, a place not only for work but for gathering, sharing stories, and uniting against common fears. That night, Thomas stood with his wife, Claire, beside him, watching Ellie play with the other children. The yard was alive with the sound of laughter, the air thick with the aroma of fresh bread baking inside the barn. "I never thought I'd feel this kind of peace again," Thomas admitted, eyes glistening. Claire smiled, and warmth radiated between them as they reminisced about the lives they had built together. But even as the laughter of the children echoed, a small part of Thomas remained vigilant, an uneasy knot of worry still nestled within him. Then came the night when it all seemed to collide. The wind howled outside, carrying with it whispers of dread. The neighbors were on high alert, but the darkness felt oppressive, thickening with every passing moment. Suddenly, a sound pierced the night, the unmistakable crunching of footsteps on gravel. "Claire," he whispered, urgency creeping into his voice. He grabbed his pitchfork, heart racing as he moved toward the door, adrenaline surging through him once more. He ordered, knowing she would likely defy him, but Claire wasn't one to be kept inside. She joined him, holding a lantern high, illuminated by braveness. Together, they stepped outside, breath synchronized as they braced themselves for what lay ahead. 3 men emerged from the shadows just as before, but this time the confidence of their steps was laced with desperation. They had returned, emboldened by their previous encounter. The leader's face twisted with determination, trying to reclaim lost ground. "Open the barn," he commanded, an ill-fated authority laced in his voice. Thomas shouted, fists clenched tight around the handle of his pitchfork. The men moved closer, a pack of wolves ready to strike. He warned, steadying his grip against the lump of apprehension swelling within him. But this time, fear didn't steal the strength in his voice. Instead, it ignited a primal instinct, sharper and keener than before. Thomas didn't wait for them to advance. He lunged first, thrusting the pitchfork forward, a fierce warning etched into his every motion. The leader faltered, surprise flashing across his eyes. The other 2 glanced at each other, surprise morphing into panic as they stumbled backward. But as Thomas moved forward, fueled by a sense of righteousness, a flicker of doubt began to worm its way into the looters' minds. Thomas bellowed, charging into the darkness with an unyielding force. The looters turned to flee, arms flailing as they scrambled into the trees, shadows swallowed by the night. Breathless, Thomas stood tall, a mix of relief and exhilaration coursing through him. He hadn't just defended his barn, he had stood his ground, a protector defying the encroaching darkness threatening to consume them. In that moment, everything felt different. As Claire pressed her side against him, her eyes shining with pride, he knew they had emerged stronger than ever together. This life they built had roots that ran deep, forged by resilience and fortified by unity. The barn, not just a place for tools and hay, had transformed into a fortress for the spirit of their community. As moonlight bathed the fields in silver, Thomas looked at the barn anew. It was home, a sanctuary that would endure, pulsing with life and love. And so, in the quiet aftermath under the star-studded sky, they learned one of life's truest lessons. Together, they could overcome anything, and nothing would ever take away what they held most dear. The cool night air hung heavy with tension, and the moon cast a ghostly silhouette over the rolling fields. The ancient barn stood like a sentinel, its wooden boards weathered by time, telling stories of sweat, triumph, and joy. But tonight, beneath its roof, a different kind of story was about to unfold. Riley Thompson, the farmer, felt it in his bones. The long days spent tilling the earth, caring for the crops, and looking after his family had prepared him for many things, but fear was a new visitor. Whispers of looters had drifted through the town, tales of men driven to desperation, prowling the dark in search of whatever they could steal. As he leaned against the barn door, the shadows seemed to stretch and sway with ominous intent. Riley's hands clenched around the handle of his pitchfork, the familiar grip offering some comfort. This wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of his hard work, a lifeline connecting him to the land and to the legacy he had built. Then it came, a sound slicing through the stillness. Low laughter echoed, unsettling and taunting. Riley's heartbeat quickened as he squinted into the darkness. 3 figures emerged from the tree line, their movements predatory, eyes glinting with greed. They didn't know him, but they saw weakness, a chance to take what wasn't theirs. One called out, swaggering forward like a peacock, "Open up that barn." Riley felt a surge of fury mixed with fear. "You think you can just stroll in and take what belongs to me?" His voice boomed through the night, resonating like thunder. The leader laughed, but his bravado wavered as he took in the scene. Riley stood tall-weathered yet strong, a guardian willing to fight. "You must be foolish if you think you can stop us." The words dripped with arrogance, but Riley sensed the doubt underlying the bravado. "Come any closer and I'll make you regret it," he warned, gripping the pitchfork tight. The moonlight glinted off its metallic prongs, a sturdy reminder of the life he had built. The trio hesitated, but desperation is a powerful motivator. They lunged forward, shouting curses as they rushed him. Riley felt a primal instinct kick in, honing his focus. This was not just about defending his property. It was about safeguarding his life's work, the land that had fed him, his wife, and their 2 small children. He swung the pitchfork with fierce determination, striking the first intruder in the leg. A howl of pain erupted, and for a brief moment he relished that flicker of victory. But before he could catch his breath, the other 2 charged at him, desperation clouding their judgment. One of them yelled, brandishing a broken bottle like a weapon. Adrenaline surged through Riley as he juggled both fear and ferocity. Around him, the world narrowed, the sounds of struggle muting everything else. It was just him and this fight, a battle for family and legacy. He shouted, his voice resonating like the distant pounding of a drumbeat. The leader took advantage of the moment to circle behind him, intent on ambushing. But Riley spun, thrusting forward with the pitchfork, catching him off guard. He felt the adrenaline coursing, eyes blazing with the fire of determination. But the second man lunged, swinging the bottle with reckless abandon. It struck the pitchfork instead, shattering into shards on the ground. Anger mingled with the sting of danger, and Riley roared he would not yield. With a fierce twist, he aimed again, catching the attacker in the stomach with a solid jab. It was enough to knock the wind out of him, sending him crashing to the ground. But the leader was on him now, rage in his eyes. He sneered, moving in close, ready to deliver a crushing blow. But Riley had no intention of yielding ground. He swung his elbow hard, driving it into the man's ribs, and seized the moment, eyes narrowing as he readied the pitchfork once more. "I'll fight for what's mine," he growled, planting his feet firmly against the ground. Riley felt the world expand around him, the air crackling with energy. He wasn't just fighting against the men before him. He was fighting for everything the barn represented, the laughter of his children echoing off the walls, the long nights spent planning, dreaming, growing. As he thrust the pitchfork again, adrenaline surged through him, a fuel igniting every fiber of his being. He struck downwards, determination driving the point towards the ground, missing the leader by inches but pushing him back. Riley shouted, voice echoing with authority, the words ringing through the stillness of the night. The leader stumbled, shock flickering in his eyes as he realized the farmer wasn't just defending his barn. He was embodying the very essence of the fight for home. We can go, he stuttered, backing away, glancing nervously at his companions. Riley ordered, not letting up, the pitchfork still poised to strike. The desperation in their faces transformed into sheer panic as they slowed their retreat, turning away and disappearing into the embrace of the shadows. Breathless, Riley lowered the pitchfork, his heart racing as he gazed into the night where the men had fled. Waves of relief washed over him, but he also felt the weight of exhaustion burying him. He had defended what was his, but what would it cost him tomorrow? A small voice called from the barn, filled with panic. His heart sank. Shouted, rushing into the barn where he found his daughter, only 6 years old, standing wide-eyed near the hay bales. He swept her into his arms, relief flooding through him. I heard scary voices. Her voice trembled as she hugged him tightly, her small body shaking against him. "It's all right. I took care of it," he said gently, brushing her hair back. "You stay close to me from now on." As they headed back outside, his wife, Sarah, emerged from the shadows of the barn, worry etched into her features. "I heard the noise. Everything is fine now," Riley reassured her, still cradling Ellie protectively. The relief in Sarah's eyes was palpable, but it swiftly turned to worry. Riley felt the knot tightening in his chest. "Then we'll be ready," he vowed, a wave of determination washing over him. As the moon hung high above, casting its silver glow, the family gathered under the stars. They huddled close, sharing stories of courage and warmth as they bathed in the glow of safety. This was their sanctuary, a haven amidst uncertainty, and they were determined to protect it. As days passed, the encounter with the looters rippled through the community like wildfire. Neighbors whispered of Riley's bravery, and the tale morphed into a story of resilience. But with each recollection, a new sense of insecurity began to arise. It was clear they needed to band together for their collective safety. Within a week, Riley organized a meeting inviting families from the surrounding farms. He stood in front of the group, the flickering lantern casting dancing shadows across his determined face. "We've all heard the stories," he began, heavy-hearted yet resolute. "We need a plan." His words hung in the air, and the anxious murmurs echoed back, shared fears painting the canvas of the night. But slowly, courage ignited in the faces around him. People stood tall, nodding in agreement. They discussed strategies, created plans for patrols, and exchanged resources. Together, they would create a safety net, a united front against the forces threatening their existence. One stormy night, Riley found himself at the barn again, vigilant. The winds howled like a ghost, lashing against the walls. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread that wrapped around him, but then he heard a nearby sound, a whisper, soft yet familiar. It was Ellie. Her tiny voice piped up, her eyes wide with innocence and concern. His heart swelled. "Of course, Ellie, you can be my lookout." Armed with the pitchfork and a flash of determination, they stepped outside. The air crackled with tension as they moved cautiously, hearts synchronized as they scanned the perimeter. Then, just as they reached the edge of the barn, a rustling sounded in the distance. Riley's instincts kicked in, a surge of primal awareness as they turned toward the noise. A figure was emerging from the darkness. He whispered urgently as he stepped in front of her, pitchfork at the ready. But instead of looters, what met his eyes was familiar neighbors from the community, armed with makeshift tools and lanterns. Relief flooded through him like a calm ocean wave. One shouted, brandishing a shovel, their faces determined. Riley felt a swell of gratitude wash over him. "Thank you, let's keep watch together." The winds whistled, but they stood tall, united against the uncertainty looming. As they took their positions around the barn, Riley felt a warmth within. A shift had taken place. Their fears, once heavy drags, became sources of solidarity as they rallied against the night. And when the looters finally returned, emboldened by the cover of darkness, they found not just Riley standing alone, but a determined community ready to defend their homes. They shouted in unison, a chorus of strength raining down on the intruders like a bolt of lightning. The looters hesitated, caught off guard as fear flickered across their faces. In that moment, they recognized the bond the farmers shared, the unwavering strength firing through the very earth underfoot. Before the attackers could gather themselves, a wave of pitchforks, shovels, and other makeshift tools surged forward, driving the intruders back into the shadows from which they came. As the sun broke through the horizon the next day, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange, the barn took on a new radiance. It stood not only as a shelter for crops, but as a testament to the power of unity, the strength that lies in standing together. Riley whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the love that filled this place and the people who had come together to protect it. In the face of darkness, they had emerged brighter than ever, ready to cultivate a future rooted not just in soil but in the fierce determination to protect what they held dear. As the days turned into weeks, Riley and his community grew closer. They shared stories around the barn, laughter filling the air, nourishing a sense of belonging. And every evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, Riley would find Ellie by his side, dreaming together about the future, a future they would protect no matter what. The barn became a sanctuary, a beacon of resilience and hope, reminding them all that in their darkest moments, together, they could face any storm that dared to approach. And beneath the starlit skies, as the laughter of children and the warmth of family echoed, they knew without a doubt the land was safe, not just because of a single farmer's bravery, but because they had forged a bond that would protect their hearts for generations to come. The sun dipped behind the horizon, drenching the twilight sky in hues of orange and purple. A warm breeze swept through the fields, but it carried with it an unsettling tension. In the heart of those verdant acres, a weathered barn stood vigilant, its wooden beams whispering stories of a life built on toil and dreams. To Frank Turner, it was more than just a structure, it was home. But tonight, that sense of home was about to be tested. Frank leaned against the barn's doorframe, his gaze drifting across the fields. He had spent years nurturing this land, his hands calloused and worn from labor. His wife, Jane, had always believed in the magic that lay within each seed they planted. And then there were his two children, Lily and Ben, the very joy of his life. These thoughts circled in his mind like a comforting blanket until the rumble in his stomach pulled him back to the present. The news had been bleak. The local sheriff spoke in hushed tones about bands of looters terrorizing farms, desperate men driven to madness by hardship. He had warned everyone to keep their doors locked to protect their property. Frank had scoffed at first. This land has stood for generations. But as darkness enveloped the rolling hills, unease settled within him. Something about the night felt off-kilter, an electric tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand straight. And then he heard it, a crack of branches, the telltale whispers of footsteps disrupting the night's tranquility. Frank's heart raced as shadows moved between the rows of corn-three figures emerging, silhouetted against the dim light of the barn. Fear knotted in his gut. These were not just shadows, they were thieves, looters seeking whatever they could steal from hardworking hands. The leader called out, swaggering forward, arrogance oozing from his every word. "Open the barn." Frank straightened, a flame igniting within him. "You want what's inside?" The man sneered, disbelief mixing with arrogance in his eyes. "You think you can scare us?" Rage bubbled within Frank. "You think this is just a barn? This is my life, my family's legacy." With every word, the pitchfork he had once used to cultivate crops felt like a weapon of defiance in his hands. The air thickened with tension, the world around him faded, leaving just him and these men. Without warning, they charged. The move was careless, driven by greed and adrenaline. Frank met their rush with fierce resolve, lowering the pitchfork just as one man lunged forward. He swung with all his might, and the point of the pitchfork caught the attacker in the shoulder. A cry pierced the night, mingling with the rustle of corn, and as the man stumbled back, Frank felt a rush of adrenaline flood through him. But the other two looters were not deterred. They pressed onward, fear replaced by fury. One of them, a hulking figure with wild eyes, brandished a metal pipe. He shouted, charging straight for Frank. Time slowed. Frank's heart thundered as he sidestepped the brute, feeling the wind from the pipe as it narrowly missed him. Frank roared, swinging the pitchfork once again, using every ounce of strength, every moment spent wrestling with the earth. The pitchfork connected with the second attacker's leg, knocking him off balance, and he fell to the ground with a grunt. But the leader remained undeterred. "You think you can fight us, farmer?" That's when Frank heard a small, frightened voice from inside the barn. It was Lily. Panic surged through him. He shouted, but his voice carried the weight of desperation. He could not let them take her. In that instant, fear ignited a deeper resolve. This was more than just a barn. This was his family's sanctuary, a place where memories thrived in the hay and the warmth of love embraced them safely. With renewed determination, Frank turned back to the attackers. "You want this barn?" Rage and love intertwined in a fierce cocktail, infusing him with strength. The leader lunged again, but this time it was different. With every swing of the pitchfork, Frank felt the memories playing in his mind. The laughter of his children, Jane's smile, the feeling of dirt beneath his nails. He would fight not just for the barn, but for everything that surrounded it. He plunged the pitchfork forward, catching the leader in the gut, forcing the man to stumble back, panic flashing across his face. Frank shouted, voice trembling with a potent mix of fear and defiance. The tide of battle shifted. The joy of fighting for what mattered surged through him, and as the last looter hesitated, the flicker of doubt spread through their trio. One of them yelled, glancing at his fallen companion. Frank steadied himself, ready for one final push. And just like that, they turned and fled, panic driving them back into the ink of the night. Their laughter had been replaced by howls of fear, echoing as they retreated. Breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through him, Frank lowered the pitchfork, his heart racing. He stood alone, the barn and all it represented steadfast behind him. He had defended his home. But as the reality of the confrontation began to settle, another thought crept in, a fear deeper than the shadows of the night. What if they came back? Lily's voice cut through the silence again, and Frank rushed inside to find her trembling, wide-eyed, clutching at her stuffed bear as if it were a shield against the fear gripping their world. "It's okay, sweetheart," he reassured her, gathering her into his arms. "They're gone now. I won't let them hurt you." Jane appeared, worry etching her features. "What happened?" "We were attacked, but I scared them off," Frank said, relief washing over him, but fear still knotted in his stomach. Lily asked, her voice small and weak, curling into her father's embrace. "I don't know," Frank replied, his heart aching with need to protect her. In the weeks that followed, the story of the attack spread through the community like wildfire. Farmers recalled their own brushes with trouble, and the specter of fear loomed large. Frank felt the unease settle like mist over the fields. The sheriff organized meetings, urging families to come together to take back control of their lives. With each passing day, their resolve strengthened. Frank called on neighbors, gathering them not just for a meeting but to take action. The barn transformed into a hub of activity, filled with chatter and planning. "What if we set up watching shifts? We can help each other," came a voice from the crowd. Frank nodded. Lily and Ben listened, their young minds absorbing the strength in every word. They helped, setting up chairs and passing around drinks, the hustle and bustle of community resilience inspiring them. But as preparations continued and safety appeared within reach, doubt still crept in. What if their efforts weren't enough? What if the urge to steal overwhelmed the looters again? One late evening, a storm rolled in, dark clouds swirling like ominous shadows. Frank stood on the porch, rain lashing around him, feeling the world tinge with darkness. The gusts of wind seemed to carry whispers of danger. Just then, a crack of thunder echoed, startling him from his thoughts. Then came the soft but unmistakable sound of footsteps in the wet grass. Heart racing, Frank's instincts kicked in. He turned to see figures lurking at the edge of the field's three shadows against the backdrop of the stormy sky. They moved deliberately, creeping closer with an audacity that sent chills down his spine. Panic rose inside him as he realized what was happening. The looters were back. It wasn't just a fight for land anymore. It was a battle for everything, the heart of his family, the very essence of his life. The door creaked open behind him and Jane stepped out, her face pale. "They've returned," he said, barely above a whisper as his grip tightened on the pitchfork. "Get inside." He cut her off, his heart pounding like a war drum. Time felt suspended, a moment filled with choices leading to unknown consequences. As the figures grew closer, Frank felt a familiar blend of fear and courage coursing through him. He would defend his barn and his family no matter the cost. The storm raged around them, rain lashing down as he stepped into the open, pitchfork at the ready. He shouted, voice booming through the tempest, challenging the very darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. The leader of the bandits laughed, a cruel sound that echoed against the wind. "What's the matter, farmer?" Frank met their gaze fiercely, fueled by the resolve that had carried him through before. "You want to take what's mine?" The standoff hung in the air, the storm raging around them, illuminating the darkness with bursts of lightning. In that moment, the world seemed to narrow down to one single moment of confrontation, a fight that would determine the future of everything he held dear. And then it happened, a sudden movement within the shadows. The attackers surged forward and Frank braced himself for the storm that lay ahead, knowing that this time it wouldn't just be him defending the barn. What would it cost him? Would his family stand beside him? With adrenaline racing, he charged into the fray, ready to face whatever awaited him. The barn stood tall in the background, a silent witness, as the battle unfolded amidst the raging storm, darkness closing in fast, everything hanging on the edge of a knife, and Frank knew a reckoning was upon them.